Today's submitted material is a passionate, religiously grounded defense of Israel's new mandate establishing the death penalty for terrorists. Right off the bat, I want to say this is a really strong, highly convicted piece of rhetorical writing. But, there are some specific areas where the logical rigor and, the tonal consistency can really be elevated to match the author's deep expertise. So let's just jump right into the first piece of feedback.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's get into it.
So, as I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that the author is rebutting pundit Head Mazik's alternative proposal. Mazik suggests capping the number of prisoners releasable in a deal instead of utilizing the gallows to fix the incentive structure.
Right.
And the author's rebuttal is that Hamas knows a law capping releases can simply be changed by a desperate government at any point. So to me, it feels a bit like arguing against installing a security door because someone might leave it unlocked, while kind of ignoring that your own preferred security system has the exact same flaw.
That makes sense. But could the evidence also support a different conclusion? Like focusing on the finality of the act itself. The dismissal of alternative deterrence policies leaves a critical gap in the logical foundation of the core argument.
Okay, how so? Where exactly is the vulnerability there?
Well, when addressing the counter-proposal to cap prisoner releases, the script dismisses the cap purely by arguing that, any laws can be changed. But this is a severe logical vulnerability because the author simultaneously acknowledges, via that opening quote about the legacy of the Netanyahu judicial mandate, that future prime ministers could also repeal this very death penalty law.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. So, by resting the rebuttal on the mutability of legislation, the author inadvertently highlights the same weakness in their own proposed solution.
Right. It creates this moment where the reader just stops and says, well, wait a minute. If a desperate government can repeal a cap on prisoner swaps, what stops them from just repealing the death penalty mandate to make a deal?
Exactly. It completely punctures the airtight seal the author is trying to build.
Yeah, and especially when you're dealing with an audience that deeply understands Israeli politics and, the agonizing history of things like the Gilad Shalit exchange. You just cannot leave a structural contradiction like that sitting out in the open.
No, definitely not. So the suggestion here is to fortify the rebuttal by shifting the focus away from the permanence of the legislation and toward the irreversible nature of the punishment itself.
Oh, that is a really sharp pivot. So you stop talking about the law and start talking about the physical reality.
Precisely. You completely remove the concept of changing laws from the defensive strategy. So, for concrete examples, the writer could explicitly argue that while a prime minister might face immense political pressure to repeal a statutory cap on swaps during a hostage crisis, a carried-out death sentence is absolute.
Right, there's no repealing that.
Exactly. Another option is to detail how the psychological finality of the gallows completely removes that specific individual from the negotiating table forever. It permanently destroys that specific incentive in a way no reversible law ever could.
That closes the loophole perfectly. So if we tighten up the logical mechanisms of how this deterrence works, we then have to look at how this life and death argument is being packaged emotionally for the audience.
Yeah, tone is huge here, especially given the gravity of the subject matter.
Let's look closely at the section discussing the political optics, specifically the section regarding politician Ben-Gvir celebrating the law's passage with champagne, and then Yaakov Katz's criticism that Jews should not celebrate death.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on defending the political optics might overlook the broader moral argument? The casual defense of political celebrations directly undermines the script's solemn appeal to sacred moral imperative.
Because early on, they set up this really profound framework, right?
Yeah, the script does an excellent job establishing a grave moral framework by citing Genesis 9:6 and that heavy Talmudic injunction about being kind to the cruel. But contrasting this immense theological weight with a casual, almost dismissive defense of a politician drinking champagne creates a severe tonal whiplash.
They actually ask the reader, why do we need to get worked up about this, don't they?
Yes, they do. And it cheapens the central thesis that this law is about a solemn duty to sanctify life and protect people. It momentarily makes it sound like a partisan political defense rather than a principled moral stand.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't the author just expressing raw, authentic frustration with what they see as a media distraction?
Sure, that's definitely where it's coming from.
Right, so if we remove that, do we sanitize the author's voice too much and lose their genuine irritation with internal Israeli politics?
I hear that, and it's a valid pushback. The frustration is entirely authentic, but we have to remember the author's ultimate goal is to persuade the reader of the morality of the law, and the current phrasing sacrifices that moral high ground for a fleeting political grievance.
I see what you mean. It's an issue of optic management. You shouldn't spend your moral capital to buy a cheap political defense.
Exactly. Well put. So the suggestion is to reframe the discussion of the political optics to ensure the tone remains consistently rooted in the gravity of the moral and existential stakes. You have to separate the validity of the law from the behavior of the politician.
How would they do that in the script, practically speaking?
Well, for concrete examples, instead of rhetorically asking, why do we need to get worked up, the writer could acknowledge that while popping champagne is inappropriate and fundamentally un-Jewish, the underlying law itself remains a tragic but necessary application of justice.
Oh, or they could actually weaponize the critic's argument to strengthen their own point, right?
Yes, exactly. The author could use Katz's criticism as a powerful springboard to say something like, Kitz is right that we do not celebrate death, which is exactly why this law is passed with a heavy heart, not a champagne glass, regardless of what one politician does.
Wow, that is incredibly potent. That completely flips the script and shows the reader the author is intellectually honest.
Right. It proves they can criticize their own political side while remaining totally unyielding on the policy itself.
Yeah, and in a piece dealing with terrorism and the ultimate punishment, reader trust is the most valuable currency you have. You just can't afford to spend it on defending a champagne toast. Okay, so once we have that consistent, solemn tone locked in, we need to ensure that the ending of the material actually honors the buildup, rather than suddenly pivoting to a new topic entirely.
Right. Structural integrity at the finish line is crucial.
Okay, so what I really like about this part is how passionately the author introduces their documentary, Zionism and Judaism, the false reparation. I mean, you can really feel the conviction jumping off the page.
Building on that point, what if we looked at it from the perspective of how that connects to the rest of the piece? The sudden introduction of the documentary on Zionism fractures the thematic unity of the preceding arguments.
Because it just feels like a total left turn.
It really does. Transitioning abruptly from the granular specifics of military courts, hanging, and deterrence directly into a broad theological claim that Judaism and Zionism are inseparable, it just feels structurally disjointed.
Yeah, it's like building a meticulous stone vault and then capping the roof with a canvas circus tent.
Exact. Because there is no connective tissue, the documentary promo feels like an unrelated add-on rather than the natural culmination of the author's overarching philosophy.
The author clearly sees the through line in their own head, absolutely. But the reader hasn't been given the map to see how executing terrorists connects to the foundational definition of Zionism. So how do we fix that?
The suggestion is to build a thematic bridge that seamlessly connects the script's definition of Jewish morality regarding self-defense directly to the divine project of Zionism mentioned in the documentary promo.
You have to show the audience that the exact same philosophical muscles are required to understand both things.
Yes, exactly. For concrete examples, the author could introduce the documentary by drawing a direct parallel. They could say that just as critics fundamentally misunderstand the Jewish balance of mercy and justice in criminal law, they similarly misunderstand the inseparable bond between the Jewish faith and the land of Israel.
Oh, that is a fantastic structural maneuver.
Right? Another approach would be to state that the secular morality which weakens Israel's security policies is the exact same Western framework that falsely tries to separate Judaism, the religion, from Zionism, the national project.
Yeah, no, exactly. It takes the overarching antagonist of the first half secular morality and makes it the bridge to the second half. It transforms the documentary from a sudden commercial break into the ultimate weapon against the ideological confusion they've been diagnosing the whole time.
It resolves the intellectual tension built up throughout the entire piece. When an essay culminates by tying its most granular policy points directly into its broadest philosophical themes, the reader experiences a profound sense of satisfaction.
Yeah, it proves the author is operating from a deep, unified worldview. Well, we've covered some significant ground today. To briefly recap our three main takeaways. First, fortify the rebuttal against alternative policies by focusing on the absolute finality of the punishment rather than the mutability of laws.
Right.
Second, maintain a consistently solemn tone by separating the moral gravity of the law from the political theater of champagne celebrations. And third, build a seamless thematic bridge between the specific arguments on deterrence and the broader themes of the Zionism documentary.
I just want to offer a final word of encouragement here. This submission is deeply researched and passionately argued, and these high-level editorial shifts aren't about softening the author's stance. They are entirely about ensuring this powerful message lands with maximum impact.
I couldn't agree more. We genuinely thank you for trusting our show with this material. We invite you to take these structural suggestions, revise your work, and submit it back in for another critique. We'd love to see how it evolves. Keep writing, and we'll catch you next time.